What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be investigating a big claim that's been thrown around the community for the past several weeks in Modern Warfare 2, and this is that there is a skill-based audio system in place that actively nerfs the amount of audio, especially footstep audio, that you're able to hear if you are a higher skilled player, whereas for a lower skilled player, you get louder and more clear footstep audio. And before we get into this, I do want to point out True Game Data did a great video debunking this in Warzone 2, but that was focused on Warzone 2, and I've already seen a lot of people saying, well, maybe it's only in the multiplayer, it's not in Warzone. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. I will leave a link to True Game Data's video down below if you want to check that out, because it is quite interesting. Now, this initially started blowing up a bunch from a particular Reddit thread where a guy posted a bunch of quote-unquote evidence of this being the case. And in this, he showed a bunch of clips with his reverse boosted account, listening for footsteps, and then he showed a bunch of clips with his non-reverse boosted account. And if you do watch all of the clips and pay close attention, it does seem like that lower skill account is hearing footsteps better than the higher skill account. However, it is worth noting his testing method was severely flawed, and it doesn't account for tons and tons of uncontrolled variables. So you can't even directly compare these. In many situations, sure, he was on the same map and maybe in a similar area of the map, but every other variable was totally different, and that effectively invalidates this testing that he did. These aren't proper tests, these aren't controlled properly. And I'll be the first to admit, it's really difficult to test things in actual public matches because you can't control these variables. That's why most of my testing is done in custom games. However, I did develop a methodology to test this properly for proper comparisons between a high skill player and a low skill player, and I'm going to be showing that off. But before we do that, I do want to at least show the best test that he did here. Again, not perfect, doesn't account for all the variables properly, but at least he was standing in the exact same spot, and it's a somewhat similar situation, although the enemy's coming from a different angle. So let's have a listen to this. I really want you to focus on the footstep audio itself. The first clip I'm going to share is with his reverse boosted account, and the second clip is with his non-reverse boosted account. Have a listen. So after watching that, it definitely seems like on the reverse boosted account, those footsteps were a lot more loud and clear than the non-reverse boosted account, if you're just focusing on that footstep audio. And if that's the result you're looking for, I can see why you would think that this is confirmation of a system like this. However, I'm going to play these clips again, and this time I want you to focus on all of the audio that isn't footstep audio, and really pay attention to the difference between the first clip and the second clip. With this, you probably noticed in that first clip with the reverse boosted account, there was almost no audio going on around the map. There were no explosions, there was very little gunfire, and the gunfire there was, it seemed to be really far away, like on the other side of the map. Whereas in that second clip, there were multiple explosions going off before that enemy came around the corner. There was also a lot more gunfire going on in the background, and if you pay really close attention, there was a decoy grenade in this player's immediate vicinity making a bunch of noise. And it's especially worth noting, it was making a bunch of noise on the left channel of his speaker, which is the direction that the enemy came from. So once you pay attention to all of these other variables that he didn't control for, it's now looking a whole lot more likely that the difference that we're hearing here between footstep audio has more to do with the uncontrolled variables and all those additional sounds that we're hearing on the high skill account, rather than actual differences in the footstep audio that you can hear. And this is a perfect example of why this can't really be used as proper evidence, because the testing just wasn't scientific at all. Instead, the better way to test this, and this is the test that I'm going to be sharing with you today, is taking a high skill account and a low skill account, putting them in the same lobby, having them stand in the exact same location, and then comparing the footstep audio difference between the two if there is any difference. This way, I'm properly controlling all the variables, it's an apples to apples comparison, and let's just start getting into it. I'm going to play a bunch of clips from a bunch of maps and a bunch of different situations. The first clip is going to be with my low skill bot account that I reverse boosted for this particular test, and then the second clip for each comparison is going to be on my main account, which is a statistical outlier toward the higher skill part of the graph. I've got roughly a 2 kill death ratio, very good win-loss ratio, and solid score per minute all around. And let's just have a listen to these comparisons, pay really close attention to the footstep audio, and see if you can tell any difference between the two clips. So there we go. There's a ton of different comparisons for you guys with apples to apples comparisons between these two accounts. I went through these over and over and over again, and I can't tell any difference between these two. I would have been able to hear those footsteps just as effectively regardless of which one of these accounts I was playing on. So all of the evidence with proper testing points to no skill-based footstep audio. Having said this though, I do think there is something going on with the footsteps in this game. I think there's some inconsistency or apparent inconsistency with footstep audio. And I do feel like higher skilled players may experience this more often than lower skilled players. However, I don't feel this is due to some nefarious system that's put into place that actively adjusts that based on your skill level. And again, the evidence that I've collected supports that. Instead, I feel like there's a few different explanations that are a whole lot more reasonable here and that would go along with the evidence we've seen so far. The first thing, and this is kind of what we saw in those initial clips that I shared from that Reddit thread, in higher skilled lobbies, there tends to be a higher frequency of other audio going on around the map. So more explosions and gunfire and decoy grenades, and all of these sources can easily drown out footsteps, as they should. Of course, if there's explosions or gunfire in an adjacent room, you're not going to be hearing somebody's footsteps approach. So I think that's a very reasonable explanation. However, going off of that, another explanation could be that there is actually a technical issue here and some sort of a bug that also relates to the fact that we have a higher frequency of these other audio sources. So perhaps there's something like a cap on the number of audio sources that can be played at any given time, and the game doesn't prioritize footsteps in this. So maybe it's literally not playing that footstep audio because the game is already handling too many other sources of audio around the map. I tried doing some testing with this in a custom game, but I couldn't seem to find any sort of audio cap. In either case, if this is actually a thing, obviously that's an issue that I hope they end up working on. But finally, another explanation for why higher skilled players may be hearing footsteps less often than lower skilled players is quite simply good players are more likely to be aware of the footstep sound that they're generating, and they adjust their gameplay accordingly. So good players tend to have a better sense of when they should pop that dead silence. Good players will also recognize that if it's a really quiet environment, maybe it's not the right time to make that push on an enemy that you know is in a building or on the other side of a wall, for instance, because you know they're going to hear you coming. I hold myself back from that all the time because I know they're just going to hear me and I'm going to lose that situation, so I approach it in a different way. Whereas in lower skilled lobbies, you tend to see people just sprinting aimlessly around the map because they don't really have that additional layer of awareness of not only their surroundings, but also the audio that they are generating for enemy players. In either case, those are just a few potential explanations for why higher skilled players maybe don't hear footsteps as often as lower skilled players, and I think all of these are much more likely and much more reasonable than a complex algorithm that's actively nerfing what you can hear in the game because you're a high skilled player. At the end of all of this, the main points I want to make are, first up, if there is a technical issue with the footstep audio, absolutely, I'm all for pushing for change when it comes to that. There should absolutely be some consistency, and if there is a technical issue with like a cap on how many audio sources are playing, 100% please fix that. I really want to get that worked out. Also, I have noticed with audio, the vertical audio can often be really rough. Like, I can swear that I hear somebody on my level, but it turns out they're either above or below me. And it would be nice to see some improvements in that area. So I'm not in any way claiming everything's perfectly fine as it is. But having said that, I also feel like a lot of you guys are relying way too much on footstep audio as your primary source of awareness. And this is Call of Duty. You can't do that in Call of Duty and expect to be successful. The primary reason for this is, at least traditionally in Call of Duty, we've always had footstep dampening perks. So that forced you to develop other sources of awareness, like paying attention to your minimap, for instance, or learning spawn patterns. Although I know in this game the spawns are absolutely horrible, one of the worst things about the game right now. But there are plenty of other ways to have awareness of your surroundings without relying on that footstep audio, and you should never be relying on footsteps as your primary source of awareness. use it in conjunction with the other sources of awareness, and then this apparent inconsistent audio or footsteps that don't play over explosions and gunfire, that won't be nearly as big of an issue for you. That's just my little 2 cents and tip at the end here. As a Call of Duty player, for a lot of you guys that are coming from other franchises, you can't necessarily rely on footsteps as much as other FPS games on the market. You have to adapt and develop other skills that are much better suited to Call of Duty. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video, and I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about these results and everything in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.